As many of you know, I spent the last many years living in China, and I was there under zero COVID for almost 3 years, about 2.5 years in total. I left to go visit my family. I didn't want to go back because the COVID restrictions were so harsh. They were just, it was like being in prison all the time. I mean, even if my city had no COVID cases and anything, as a teacher, I was forbidden from traveling anywhere outside the city, just even to go across the river to have dinner with a friend. I wasn't allowed to do that. They locked me up. And that's why I didn't go back. Now things are starting to change. And the rumor is 2023, with all this pent up demand, people are going to be coming and going from China a lot. And I hope to be one of them. You take off all the political crap that everyone talks about on other channels. Objectively, China is just an incredible place. Even the bad things about China are remarkably interesting. We'll see what happens. I have here an article, I think it's more of an opinion piece, but I think it might shed some light on what's going on there right now. In its single-minded pursuit of the zero COVID strategy, the Chinese government was omnipresent and omnipotent, using its unlimited resources and unchecked power to control the nation. After having nearly exhausted its resources and the goodwill of the public, the government has now simply disappeared, just as many Chinese are getting very ill with the virus and dying from it. Make no mistake, that is happening. So many people are sick. We all knew that this was going to happen. It was just a matter of time. And it looks like they've ripped the Band-Aid off. They're coping with it in a completely different manner than what was projected to the Chinese public and the world over the last 2.5, 3 years. For much of this year, Young, an engineer in Shenzhen, took COVID-19 tests nearly every day from one of the more than 40 government-built booths in his neighborhood. Whenever he missed one, he would get text reminders from his district. After buying pain relief medication, he got calls from 3 different community workers because the state had strict rules about the sale of such over-the-counter drugs. Since the Chinese leadership abruptly abandoned its stringent zero-COVID policy several weeks ago, Yang has rarely heard from the government. Regular fever medications, cold medications, ibuprofen, pain medications that people would take for the common cold or a sore throat, or you have a little bit of a back pain. You could not get those at the local pharmacy. You had to go to a hospital and be tested. And if you didn't have a negative COVID test, you couldn't get into the hospital to get yet another test in order to get your ibuprofen. Depending on who you were and what you did for a living as a teacher, I was required to be tested constantly, a few times a week, sometimes more, sometimes every day. And you have to build your schedule around the testing. Everything was designed around when you can go get tested, but not just getting the test, when the results of the test come down. Some places, if they were remote, wouldn't post your test results for a day, sometimes 36 hours. Other places you'd get it in a couple of hours, because if you don't get your test, you cannot operate the rest of your schedule. No one is in charge now, said Young, who asked to be identified only by his surname because of safety concerns. His daughter's school was still open last week, and even though most students were staying home either because they were ill or worried about getting sick, there's no national mask mandate. People with mild symptoms are showing up at work because no one bothers to check in on them anymore. Medicines are in short supply, so Young is sharing what he has with friends. His family has 4 rapid test kits, which are being saved until they're really needed. Yeah, that's happening. And then they first scrapped the lockdown policies and everything. It took everyone by surprise. There was no public debate about it. There was no notification that, hey, in a couple of days we're going to do this. No, it just ended overnight. And everyone went, what? A lot of them were sick, and it is spreading, but a lot of them were faking being sick because they didn't want to get sick, because they're not even counting things anymore. For a powerful government that likes to brag about its command of the country and has published a 4-volume compilation of speeches and articles by its top leader titled Xi Jinping, The Governance of China, the absence of direction at a moment of crisis has made the public question the legitimacy and the credibility of the Chinese Communist Party. It also highlights a crucial but not always obvious distinction in leadership. The ability to control is different from the ability to govern, Chen Tianyang, an entrepreneur, wrote on his social media WeChat timeline last week. Xu Kaijin, a best-selling author famous for novels that explore the intricate workings of China's bureaucratic politics, wrote on his verified Weibo account that the abrupt change made it abundantly clear what our government will do, what it likes to do, what it can do, what it doesn't like to do, what it can't do, and what it doesn't want to do. If good governance is about transparency, responsibility, accountability, and responsiveness to the needs of the people, the Chinese government has barely practiced it, either in its harsh zero-COVID policy or its haphazard reopening. Unlike many governments that took steps to flatten the infection curve before reopening, the Chinese government suddenly let go of nearly all restrictions, most likely an effort to rush an enormous country to herd immunity while leaving the old and vulnerable in precarious situations. I don't think that's very fair. Yes, there is something about there not being any of that, debate or public notice or a gradual relaxing of it. One way or another. I do think that herd immunity and moving towards herd immunity is the only way out of this. It said that the Chinese government suddenly let go of nearly all restrictions. It hasn't. It's just let go of some and pushed the responsibility of the mitigation of the virus down to the local levels without proper guidelines. And so it's this patchwork of rules all across the country at the community level. The change in pandemic control strategy doesn't mean the government can sit on its hands, Wu Jinglian, a top Chinese economist known for advocating for smaller government, told the Caixin magazine. It must avoid going from one extreme to the other. Qin Liwen, a former journalist, wrote on her WeChat timeline, "Only when a government does what it's supposed to do can the people be responsible for themselves." I'm not sure I agree with that, but okay. The local governments haven't been doing much either. Many officials are probably waiting for guidance from their superiors. Zero COVID could be quantified so everyone knew what to do. In the top-down system like the Communist Party, the underlings are often at a loss for what to do when the big boss doesn't set a goal. That's Leadership 101. For weeks, Xi said nothing about the end of the country's zero-COVID policy, which was considered his signature campaign. On Monday, in his first public comment on the dismantling of zero-COVID, Xi was vague, saying that China's epidemic prevention and control was facing new situations and tasks. He urged the public to develop good personal hygiene habits and practice a civilized and healthy lifestyle. His remarks didn't mention either the high infection rates or the death counts. It would be wise for the officials to wait for his directive, but the public can't wait. Emotions are running high as millions of people are becoming infected every day, leaving pharmacy shelves empty, medical workers overwhelmed, and morgues full. The virus wasn't eliminated to zero, a recent Weibo comment said. The government's credibility has been reduced to zero. Wow, I don't think you can get away with saying that on Weibo. That person probably got in trouble. Trust me, that they look for those types of things. But it is true that the hospitals are full, the pharmacies are running low on medication. A widely circulated WeChat article speculated that the shortage of fever medications reflected the government's lack of preparation for loosening control. And if the government had shown the same political will that it had in implementing zero COVID, the article argued, it could have ensured there was ample supply of such medication. It doesn't care about the ordinary people, leaving them to fend for themselves and even delighted in their chaos, the article said, and it urged officials to show up where the public most needed them to win back trust. The low confidence in the government is forcing people to help themselves and help one another in local WeChat groups. People made arrangements to share their fever medicines and rapid test kits with their neighbors. They are asking strangers for help because they're not getting it from their government. Don't expect anything from Leviathan. There's no point in appealing either. Chen Min, a former journalist better known by his pen name Xiao Shu, wrote in his WeChat timeline, referring to the central government. In the end, we have to help ourselves. Only by building an extensive network of social connections can we weave a real social safety net in the darkest moment and save countless lives. This is exactly the type of governance crisis about which Xi had once warned the party. It is not up to us to judge our party's governance capacity or performance. They must and can only be judged by the people, Xi said in a speech in 2013. That was almost 10 years ago. If we are pretentious and divorce ourselves from the people or put ourselves above them, we will surely be abandoned by them. This is the case for any party, and it is an iron law which admits of no exception. Well, there you go. It is a very interesting dynamic. You see very little information coming out of China about this topic specifically. If there's one thing that I learned after all those years of living in mainland China, it's that no matter what happens at the top, no matter what happens in other countries, the local communities will always come together to help each other. It is remarkable the amount of community that I see in that country. And I have faith that all of these people who are suffering right now, trying to get through this wave of COVID that's hitting them, they're going to come out better on the other end. They're going to come out as a stronger community on the other end. That is what I believe. For all my friends in China, I pray for you every day. What do you think about this? Comment below, let it be known.